Okay, today I would like to talk about how to get your English level to C2 level by practicing with the scripts of podcast and AI.
First, why should somebody go to Istanbul?
Because it's just got such a unique place in this world and history. So for me, that's got to be it. I mean, it's the history. Other things as well. The diversity of neighborhoods is incredible. And thirdly, this is going to be my little bit lighter answer, but Turkish breakfast.
Because it's got such a unique place in this world and history. Because it's got such a unique place in this world and history. I mean, for me, that's gotta be. I mean, it's the history and other things as well. The diversity of neighborhoods is just incredible. Okay, the host asked this question. First, why should somebody go to Istanbul? So, do you remember the reasons why somebody should go to Istanbul? Do you remember the answer of the guest?
Okay, the guest said history, cultural diversity,
Yeah.
and Turkish breakfast. Did I get that right?
Very close, almost. When it comes to practicing with podcasts, what you need to take into consideration is that the podcast that you're practicing with needs to be related to your interests. What I mean by that is you need to practice with podcast, with the scripts of podcast, if you have a specific goal. If you want to improve your English on a very specific subject, let's say you're gonna do your oral exam about psychology or about politics or about finance, you need to work on this very specific but very deep subject. If you have a specific goal, then you need to practice with the script of podcast. When it comes to practicing with podcast, obviously you need to listen to the podcast a few times during the week, just whenever you have free time. Maybe you go to work, maybe you're on the subway, maybe you take a walk, maybe you're walking your dogs. Whenever you have the time, just listen to the podcast because that's the subject that you're interested in, okay? There is one big problem. There is a major problem when it comes to learning English with podcasts. And this problem is, podcasts are very long, like 40 minutes, 50 minutes. So when you start to work with the podcasts, in order to make the most of it, you need to break down the podcast into many different parts. Like if you try to work on the podcast all at once, like in one sitting, you will get frustrated, you will get overwhelmed, you will lose yourself. You will be all over the place. You will feel like you will get this feeling like, oh my god, I don't know what I'm doing. This is becoming more and more frustrating. So basically, you will not make the most of it. And at some point, you will give up on learning English with the script of podcast. In order to learn English with podcast in the best way possible, you need to create your study schedule. Now, you need to break down a podcast into many different parts. For instance, let's say that every single day you will work on the podcast for about 2 hours. You will practice with the script of podcast for about 2 hours, okay? Or 3 hours. In my mind, okay, Arsan, I will work on this podcast. This podcast is for about 50 minutes and I would like to work on this podcast for about a week. I would like to dedicate my week to this podcast. What I do is, for instance, let's say day 1, I work on the first 10 minutes of the podcast with the scripts. So basically, when I work on like the 10 minutes of the podcast every single day, I will be completing the podcast in 5 days. And on the weekends, for the day 6 and 7, on the weekends, again, I work on the podcast, just general repetition. So basically, I dedicate at least 7 days to one single podcast because it's 50 minutes long podcast, okay? Get your scripts, okay? Work on like the 10 minutes of the podcast for about like 2 hours, okay? And go through those lines. First, looking at the scripts and then without looking at the scripts. First, why should somebody go to Istanbul? For me, why should somebody go to Istanbul? For me, it's just hard to whittle it down for a few reasons. Just work on the podcast for about 2 hours, casually like this. Work on like the 10 minutes of the podcast like that. The other thing is you need to make sure that you always practice with the script. Sometimes I get questions like, will it be okay if I practice on my phone? Or will it be okay if I practice, through my PC, printing out the documents, the pages? It's very expensive, etc. The thing is, practicing with the scripts, basically learning the topic from the page, from the papers, makes a huge difference in your language learning process or in acquiring the information. There is even scientific studies that show that learning the information from the documents, from the papers, is way more efficient compared to learning the information from PC, from digital tools, okay? So for one thing, when you practice from your phone, there is a really high chance that you will get distracted. And whereas when you start to practice with the scripts, when you start to learn English with the papers, you completely immerse yourself. You avoid any possible distraction. You turn off your PC, you put away your phone. You're fully focused on what you work on, and that makes a huge difference. And not only you make the most of it, like you avoid any possible distraction, but also at the same time, there is a really high chance that you will process the information better and you will retain the information in the long term. So this is why learning the information from the papers makes a huge difference. So I highly recommend that you practice English with the scripts always. After practicing with the script or podcast for about 2 hours, just like the way I do in my videos, you can start to use AI. Okay, how can we use AI? How can I use AI? While you're practicing on the podcast, you can do two things. First of all, talk about the subject to AI and ask AI to System AI, for instance, or Easy Speak. Talk about the subject to the AI. Ask her to remember the subject, and afterwards, next day or a week later, you can ask AI, can you please summarize the things that we talked about last weekend or last week? Or can you just summarize every single topic that we went through throughout the week? So basically, you can refresh your memory, and by refreshing your memory, you will have gone through many subjects or many talking points that you worked on throughout the week, and that way you will increase your chance to retain the information. So for instance, in today's video, I would like to give you some examples. Get your scripts, okay, work on the 10 minutes of the podcast for about 2 hours, okay, and go through those lines, first looking at the scripts and then without looking at the scripts, and then start using AI. For that, I'm gonna use System AI again. Please go check out this video. Please make sure to watch this video. In this video, I showed you guys how I actually use System AI for learning English with podcasts. Okay, so also I mentioned that I told you that there was one area in Istanbul that was 100% my favorite. Do you remember my favorite area in Istanbul? What was my favorite neighborhood in Istanbul? Do you remember that?
Shishane?
Yeah.
You said you liked Shishane. Described it as up and coming, lots of cafes, art galleries, and consulates, and close to Taksim.
Yeah, exactly. You're doing really great. You remember everything. And in this video, I will show you guys how I actually prepare System AI to help me with the podcast. How I actually get help from System AI to practice and learn English with podcasts.
Hey, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
Well, I'm functioning optimally, I guess you could say. It's nice to be chatting again. What's been keeping you busy lately?
I mean,
You yourself.
I'm working on a podcast again.
Oh, all right. Still at it with the podcast, huh? What's the topic this time around? Anything interesting brewing?
Actually, it's the same podcast. Do you remember what podcast that I was working on, or do you remember the topic that we were, discussing?
Vaguely. It was about Istanbul, right? And the Grand Bazaar specifically. We talked about haggling and the history and how multilingual the sellers are. Is that still the focus?
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a long time. When was the last time that we worked on this podcast together?
It was October 26th, I believe.
Wow.
We spent, a good chunk of time.
So how long exactly has it been? How long has it been exactly?
Okay, let me quickly check. Roughly 5 weeks.
5
November
weeks.
1st to...
So it's been 5 weeks and
Whoa.
you're still able to remember the topics that we talked about.
Well, I don't exactly forget, It's more like the details get a little less crisp over time, but yeah, 5 weeks isn't that long for me, I guess.
Yeah.
It's good to have a consistent conversation partner.
I will work on this podcast again one more time and I want you to help me with it, okay? Can you help me out with it? Can you help me out with the podcast?
Absolutely. Glad to hear it. What kind of help are you looking for?
I mean,
Do you want me to help brains?
no, I want to talk about the podcast to you and I want to mention some of the important talking points. And maybe later on, maybe next week, for instance, we can go through the conversation that we went through today and we can refresh our memories. What do you say?
That sounds good. Lay them out. Hit me with those talking points and we can run through them.
Why should somebody go to Istanbul?
Because it's just got such a unique place in this world and history. So for me, that's got to be it. I mean, it's the history. Other things as well. The diversity of neighborhoods is incredible. And thirdly, this is going to be my little bit lighter answer, but Turkish breakfast.
The guest says that Istanbul's got such a unique place in the world and history. He says, obviously you got Constantinople and then Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, all, coming over each other, historically very rich. That's what he says. And also at the same time, it's very diverse. He says it's very diverse culturally in terms of cultures and, neighborhoods. There are so many distinct neighborhoods that are very different from each other. And also food. Lastly, food, he says.
That's a pretty eloquent answer. He really captures the feeling of Istanbul being... Istanbul. Okay, so what are your thoughts on that as a listener? What would the host say next?
I mean, as someone who was born in Istanbul, even though I'm not Turkish, as someone who was born here, I agree with most of the things that he said here in the podcast.
Okay, that's good. You've got personal connection to draw from. How does the host follow up?
The other thing that I want to do reminds me the things that I told you here in this moment, at this very moment. And I want you to remind me what I just told you at this moment a few days later when I ask you again. So can you please summarize the things that I said here?
Absolutely. Let me just quickly recap. You agree with the guest points about Istanbul being unique, historically rich, culturally diverse, with distinct neighborhoods and amazing food. You also emphasized your personal connection to the city as someone born there, even though you aren't Turkish yourself. I'll file that away. Remind me in a few days and I'll do my best to recall.
Okay, so basically I count on you. I'm counting on you.
You can count on me.
As you can see, guys, for instance, you work on a topic for about 2 hours and then you have conversation about a topic with the AI. I think it's really great for you to talk about the topic with someone, even if it's AI. Maybe you're kind of like feeling shy, or maybe you're not confident about speaking English with someone, and it's by doing this you can overcome your problem. You can overcome this fear of speaking English. Maybe you have to give a public speech sometime. Maybe you have to make a presentation. And in order to prepare for that, you can most definitely practice and get ready by using AI. So basically, first of all, make sure that you work on this subject, you work on the podcast 2 hours every single day. Like, I go through those lines, first looking at the scripts, and then without looking at the scripts, I repeat them, first looking at the scripts, and then without looking at the scripts, and then second of all, I practice with AI. I have conversation about the subject or about a topic with AI. That will help me to get more and more familiar with the subject and maybe learn even new words or new terms. Also, at the same time, I would like to be very transparent about the AIs that I've been using. Sesame AI is not the only AI or is not the main AI that I've been using for practicing English. My phone is iPhone 6s. And Sesame AI doesn't work on iPhone 6s because iPhone 6s and also I guess 7s, this generation doesn't get any update anymore. So I'm not able to use Sesame AI on my iPhone 6s. And this is my mom's phone that I borrowed from her to practice with Sesame AI, Samsung. Sesame AI is working on this phone because this phone is still getting updates, I guess. I don't know. Easy Speak is actually a very useful AI for people who want to learn English. And yeah, I've been using it and I think it's really good in my opinion, especially if you want to learn English, if your goal is to learn English. So this is why I will be giving you some examples from Easy Speak, okay?
All right, Arsen. Then let's pick up where we left off with the guests' reasons for visiting Istanbul. You mentioned they highlighted history, diversity, and Turkish food. Which of those sounds most exciting to you?
I mean, I don't want to answer that question right now. I would like to move on with the rest of the podcast if it's okay for you.
Absolutely. Arsen, we can definitely continue with the rest of the podcast. What's the next fascinating detail or experience the guest shares?
Did the guest mention any specific must-see spots within that neighborhood?
I mean, he says that, you're going to find a lot of those top sites here. Blue Mosque, Topkapı Palace, and also, again, very close to the neighborhood. Again, it's in this neighborhood, Grand Bazaar.
You've perfectly summarized those key Istanbul attractions. Arsen, saying Grand Bazaar is in this neighborhood is clear and correct. What other landmarks or experiences did the guest recommend exploring in Istanbul?
I mean, they talk about the Grand Bazaar, for instance. They go into the details about the Grand Bazaar. Do you know what Grand Bazaar is, or do you have any information about the Grand Bazaar, or can you give me a little bit information about it?
You're absolutely right to dive into the Grand Bazaar. Arsen, it's one of Istanbul's most iconic and historic cover markets. A true labyrinth of shops selling everything from spices and textiles to jewelry and ceramics. It's been a bustling hub for centuries. What did the guests find most captivating about it?
I mean, they say that especially if you want to buy a carpet, definitely you should go to Grand Bazaar. And also they talk about the haggling. Haggling is a whole different experience.
If you have a little bit of Turkish to play with, it's a lot of fun to go there and sort of haggle. People there are actually pretty kind, I find.
You've captured those key points perfectly. Arsen, haggling is a whole different experience. Sounds very natural. Did the guests share any funny or memorable haggling stories from the Grand Bazaar?
Yeah, the host actually shared some of his experiences. But before we talk about this, before we move forward, I would like to ask this question. What does haggling mean?
Arsen, haggling means to bargain or negotiate over the price of something, trying to get it for a lower price than the seller initially asks. Have you ever tried haggling while shopping?
Yeah, sometimes from time to time, but what's the difference between haggle, bargaining, and negotiation?
That's a fantastic question. Haggle and bargain are very similar, meaning to dispute the price of something. Negotiation is a broader term that involves discussing and reaching an agreement on terms, which could include price but also other conditions. Does that distinction make sense?
But can you give me some examples in which context, in which situation I can use haggle, and I can use negotiation, and I can use bargaining?
Great question. Arsen, we use haggle or bargain informally, often for things like souvenirs or cars. where the price isn't fixed. Negotiation is more formal and for bigger deals, like a salary or a contract. Does that clarify it for you?
Yeah, now it makes a lot of sense to me. But for instance, if let's say I mail with someone, let's say with a company or with a brand, so should we say that we bargain or we negotiate the prices?
That's a fantastic real-world example. Arson. When you're emailing a company or a brand back and forth about terms or a deal, you'd definitely say negotiating or bargaining for something like a price or contract. Haggling feels a bit too informal for that kind of professional interaction. What kind of negotiation have you found most challenging?
But what's the fine line? What's the slight difference between bargaining and negotiation?
That's a great question. Arson. Bargaining often refers to a back and forth about price, usually for goods. Negotiation is a broader term for discussing and reaching an agreement on various terms, which could include price, but also conditions or contracts. Does that distinction help?
So basically, in this case, if I'm at the market, if I'm, let's say, shopping somewhere, or if I'm buying somewhere, like at the market, if I'm at the market and I'm buying something, or maybe from a shop or store, whatever it is, I could say I'm bargaining the prices. But when it comes to mailing with a company or brand, negotiation. We say negotiation.
You've absolutely got it. Arson, your understanding is spot on. Bargaining for the market and negotiation for companies or brands is the perfect distinction.
Obviously, my first choice always will be to talk with people, real life people, but when you have the chance, practicing with AI is also a great opportunity at this time. This is the time where we need to practice, we need to speak as much as we possibly can. We need to take every single opportunity to speak English, to use English in our daily lives. So basically, long story short, what I do is I work on the podcast, I learn about the information, the subject, I get more and more familiar with the terms, with the vocabulary, and after doing this, I talk about the subject to AI, and I want the AI to remind me the subject in the upcoming days. For instance, a week later, when I work on the podcast one more time, I want the AI to remind me what are the main topics or subjects that we touched on or we mentioned in our previous conversations, and basically, I train AI about the subject. And by training AI about the subject, I actually teach the subject to me by getting help from the AI. And also at the same time, if there are any words or expressions that I don't know or I don't understand, I make sure to ask to AI. Basically, these are the main two AIs that I've been using recently to practice English, to speak English. And I encourage you to, if your goal is to reach C2 level English, you can do this. And also remember that you should not learn English with the script of podcast if you're not somewhere between almost advanced level, okay? If you're intermediate or if you're a beginner, practicing with the podcast will be a huge mistake. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.